Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 191, recorded live March 10th, 2014. I am your host and the ever-exhausted from the SharePoint Conference, Todd Klindt. Before we go any further, though, I need to thank my sponsors, and that is the folks at Rackspace. So you can go out to sharepoint.rackspace.com, find out about all the cool SharePoint things that we do at Rackspace, or just go to www.rackspace.com and find out about all the other cool things that we do. We do Exchange, we do hosting, we do Linux, whatever that is. I think my toaster runs on Linux, I forget. We do it all. You can find out about that at www.rackspace.com. But SharePoint.rackspace.com is where the real coolness is at. It's got our SharePoint products, our SharePoint services. We've got white papers there and videos and all kinds of crazy stuff. So go out there, and my boss has a thing set up. If we don't get a certain number of hits there every day, I get beaten with a chair. So for goodness sakes, think of the chair. Go out to SharePoint.rackspace.com. So the first section we always do is the production notes. We did not do a Netcast last week because I was at the SharePoint Conference. More on that in a minute. So you got last week off. The week before that, I don't remember how quickly I got everything out, so I don't know what to put in the production notes. But we will say that it all went perfectly, swimmingly, just the idyllic example of what a technology podcast should be like. That was what this thing was like 2 weeks ago, and nobody can say anything different. So the production notes, good job on me. It'll only be downhill from this next week. It can only get worse than it was last week, because last week was perfect, absolutely perfect. So the big news in the topics this week, besides my slides not going, there we go. The big topic, of course, is the SharePoint Conference. And I know a bunch of the people in the chat room now are at the SharePoint Conference because I saw them myself. So there's going to be a lot of chatting about that in the chat room. But I just want to say I could spend the next hour talking about all the cool things that happened at the SharePoint Conference. I will try very hard not to, because I've got some other things that I want to talk to. There's some other big news in the SharePoint world, but the first chunk we're going to talk about that. But it was just amazing. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to thank all the people that came to our sessions. We had a lot of people. So Shane and I did kind of 4 sessions. We did a day-long pre-conference session on Sunday, and that went from 9 to 5, but without the cool theme song. And we talked about installation and configuration. We took lots of notes, or talked lots of questions, things like that. The crowd was real awesome. It was literally standing room only. The room was so packed that they had to bring in more chairs because all the chairs were taken. And if you've ever been to a technology conference, we're all kind of afraid of each other, so we only sit in half of the chairs. In the pre-conference session, all the chairs were full, and Shane spent like the first 15 minutes just kind of ushering people in. So someone would come in and be like, all right, there's a seat there, 3rd row, 7 in, and people were sitting. Honestly, though, that's where Shane really shines. The less he talks, kind of the better everybody is. That's probably the most useful he was the entire conference, was helping people find a place to sit. But they ended up bringing in a couple more rows of chairs. We got close to 200 people. I mean, at the break, I went and asked them how many they'd clicked in. It was like 178, something like that. So for a pre-conference session, that was pretty good. We were happy with that. It went well. People asked a lot of questions. Looks like people got a lot of value from it. So that was a good time. These things, when you think about sitting in front of a room full of people for 8 hours or however many hours it was, ended up being 6 with breaks, but you're like, man, we are never going to have enough to talk about. And as always, because of the questions, the interactions we got from the crowd, the day flew by. 5 o'clock came, and we still had a lot of great things to talk about. And as always, there was a bunch of things we wanted to talk about that we didn't get to, but it was a good time. So thanks to everybody that showed up for that. Then the next session we had Monday off, which was nice to kind of recover a little bit from traveling, and the day long thing. Tuesday we had the session that I was most terrified about. And I've been doing this SharePoint thing, so I realized I've been doing this public speaking about SharePoint thing for like 8 or 9 years now, which is just amazing to me that you guys haven't just gotten completely sick of this and just barred me from all stages all across the world. But I've been doing this long enough now that I don't normally feel a lot of panic when it comes to sessions. I don't really get nervous about sessions anymore. I probably should, but I just don't. But this session that we did on Tuesday was an exception to that. So probably 2 weeks before the SharePoint conference, it started occurring to me that the session we were doing on Tuesday, I may have bitten off more than I could chew. And the session that we did Tuesday was load testing SharePoint with Visual Studio 2013. Hold the laughter in the chat room and all that. I know the thought of me doing anything with Visual Studio is hysterical and sad, kind of all at the same time. But again, about 2 weeks before the SharePoint conference, as I was going through my slides and going through my demos, I thought, oh my God, I've gotten in way over my head with this. What was I thinking? Because normally what happens for any of these sessions or conferences, Tech Ed, SP Tech Con, SharePoint conference, any of these things, they put out a call for papers, and I've got a Word document that I keep. Every conference I put all my abstracts in a Word document. I go through the last 2 or 3 conferences, kind of see which sessions that I want, and then send them that thing in. So I sent them like 8 sessions, something like that. It was a bunch of them, and that video or that load balancing one was kind of at the bottom. It was kind of a last thought because of some stuff that had gone on with work and some stuff that I had to do. I thought, oh, this would be kind of a cool thing to do. So we get that back, and I'm like, this would be great. So about 2 weeks before the conference started is when it really occurred to me, oh my God, I need to get on stage in front of a bunch of people and open up Visual Studio. What was I thinking? And so it got a little scary. Fortunately, though, I know a lot of people in the SharePoint community, and they took pity on me. I think I'm all kind of like that special little brother that they, they're like, oh, that's so cute. He's still trying. Oh, they tussle my hair and all that. But Steve Smith, so a friend of mine from the UK who works at Combined Knowledge there, he has done a session like this one before at previous conferences. So I reached out to him and said, hey, Steve, can I bounce some ideas off you? Can I show you my demos, things like that? So Steve very graciously send me a link to one of his previous videos, and then he just kind of went through, spent like an hour and a half with me on Skype a couple weeks ago, just kind of going through the things I was going to talk about. He had some suggestions about things that I should make sure I cover that I hadn't necessarily planned on covering. And I think if that session wasn't just a complete bag of crud, it's all because of Steve Smith. And I absolutely meant to thank him on stage Tuesday when we did the session, and I forgot. So those of you that are in the chat room that were at the session, pretend that I thanked Steve Smith on stage. And those of you who are listening to the audio or the video, again, I meant to thank Steve Smith for all that. So, but anyway, that session went far better than I thought it was going to. I was afraid that I wasn't going to know enough. I was going to run out of time, and of course, or I was going to run out of stuff before I ran out of time. Of course, I didn't, and there was a bunch of things that we wanted to talk about that we couldn't. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell the funniest thing that happened to me during the whole SharePoint conference, and it's always a great time when you can be the butt of a joke. So here it is. So the session started off pretty well, though one of the things that every speaker who does, a demo should do, you should have a program called Zoom It on your computer. And Zoom It is a program that Mark Rusinovich wrote, and it gives you a hotkey, and you can zoom any part of your screen, you can scroll around, you can mark it up. Great tool for anybody, and anybody that does any presentations should have it. So in preparation for SharePoint Conference, I rebuilt the machine that I did my demos on. I rebuilt all of the VMs, everything. I forgot to install Zoom It. We get out there on stage, the big thing, 1,000 people in the room, and we get a Visual Studio up, and a couple people were like, hey, we can't see it. Fair enough. And we messed with the resolution stuff again, and it wasn't working. I'm like, oh, I just need to install Zoom It. This is easy. Because I had downloaded Zoom It, but just had forgotten to install it. And went into my host, pulled the Zoom It file up, double-clicked it. It was corrupt. It wouldn't install. So there I am on stage in front of a bunch of people. So I'm obviously not going to hook my machine up to the internet, make everybody watch me download that and fumble through that. So what I ended up using instead was the Windows magnifier. Turns out that might not have been the best tool for the job. Probably better than not being able to see the screen, but it's just not as fluid. It's kind of ugly. So that was kind of ding number one. But I think we got past it. Everybody kind of understood. So then I went through I'm not going to go through the whole load testing session for you, but there's a spot where you kind of walk through and you record some web steps. It's called creating a web test. And basically Internet Explorer opens up, you do your thing, you browse to SharePoint, you upload a file, you do whatever the thing is that you want to test, and you save it. And Visual Studio saves this out as a web test, and it's got all the steps and things like that. So I'd done a couple of surveys when the session started. One of them was I asked everybody, why they were in the session. If they were there because they'd been asked to do load testing before and just didn't have any earthly idea how to do it, and a bunch of people raised their hands for that. I asked if there were people there who were just kind of being proactive, who had not had to do it before but wanted to do it in the future, wanted to stress test their farms, and a few other people raised their hands. And then I asked the third question, how many people are here just to watch me fail miserably in Visual Studio? And everybody's hands went up, and here's the time where that got paid off. Here's where it paid off. So Shane and I are up on stage, and I show the web test part, and it all, makes sense and everything. And I had also asked about how many developers there were in the session, just to kind of get a feel for how many people were comfortable with Visual Studio. And turns out there were a bunch of them. There were a bunch of developers in the classroom, and so I wanted to make sure that I did honest by them and made sure that I did the demo correctly for them. So at one point I asked, so there's a spot where the web test comes up, and there's a button up there that says generate code. And so I hesitated to do it because the class wasn't really about code, but there were enough developers in the room that I wanted to show the code if they wanted to do anything with it. So I hit the button that says generate code, and a little wizard thing kicks off, and it goes through, and the code window comes up, and it is the code version of the web test that we just recorded. So it's got the the thing at the top, and I scrolled down and I showed people where the requests were, the things like that. And one of the guys in the audience, off on stage left there, said, "Hey Shane, I got something for you." He says, "Todd, scroll up to the top there." So I scroll up a little bit, and he's like, "No, scroll up a little bit more." I say, okay, and I scroll up a little bit more, and in the header for the file that I just generated, it's got a bunch of stuff, copyright Microsoft, blah, 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 and then in the middle it says, this code was generated by a tool. And the crowd went wild. Everybody just thought that was the funniest thing ever, and really all I could do was just stand there and take it. There wasn't much else that I could do. So after everybody got done with that one, Shane went down, shook the guy's hand, and all that, and gave him a T-shirt, and it was a good time. It was a good tension breaker. But that session went pretty well, I think. So we're back in. The chat room is down, and I rebooted my box. We're just going to drive on. I will miss the heckling of the chat room, but I'm sure they will find another way to let me know about how much I'm stinking. So anyway, the Visual Studio session went pretty well. Got a lot of really good feedback from it. Thank you. Like 200 people filled out evaluations for that, so I appreciate that. A lot of folks really liked it. A lot of folks wanted us to go in more depth with that. They wanted less about how to set it up, more about how to interpret the results. That's absolutely fair criticism. And I think what we might do, if there's enough demand for this session in the future, we may do a part 1 and a part 2, because there's just too much to do, especially when you're doing load tests that are like 5 and 10 minutes long. They really take 5 and 10 minutes. There's not much you can do to make that happen faster. So we may end up doing a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 is how to set everything up. Part 2 is then how to interpret it, and then some crazy things you can do. Because we had some ideas, though we honestly knew we weren't going to have time, about doing things like restricting SQL to 4 gig of RAM and then showing what happened. Things like that. But we had a lot of big plans for that one. So then the next day, Wednesday, the 2 sessions that we had were PowerShell and Upgrade. They went pretty well. We've done those before, so they were very comfortable, very well rehearsed. That went pretty well. My laptop, once again, like it likes to do, it gets all stage frighty, and when I start doing demos on it, it slows down. But it was no match for our preparation, and we were able to get through and do all that. So thanks to everybody that showed up for our sessions. If you haven't already, if you went to our sessions and you haven't already filled out an evaluation, please do that. Log into my SPC, and it's up in the right-hand corner somewhere, and let us know what you think. I absolutely do read those. I've read through every comment that every person has left for all 4 of the sessions that we did this week. I'm not saying I'm always going to make the change that you suggest, but I absolutely do want to hear your feedback. There was somebody who, and I saw they'd done this for some other sessions too, said they liked our session better than bacon. So that's pretty high praise. I don't know if they meant it or not, but I appreciate that. So there were a bunch of other things that happened at the SharePoint conference. I'm just going to hit a couple of them because, again, now I've completely lost track of how long I've been doing this. I'm thinking about 15 minutes now. The keynote on Monday morning, former President Bill Clinton was there. I kind of expected that to be more energetic and alive than it was. He seemed tired. He seemed just not excited about what he had done. And I know the man is a great speaker, a great orator, but we didn't feel it that Monday morning. But what they did do, they released a couple of things. Again, there's a bunch of stuff they talked about, won't cover it all. One of the things was they announced that they will release another version of on-prem SharePoint. That will be out next year in 2015. So us IT pros will have something to do for at least 2 more years. They didn't say much else about that other than they're committed to on-prem. There will be another version. It's coming out in 2015. It's not everything's going to the cloud. Another thing that they did was they showed a preview of a product called Orca that is sort of a search-driven thing. It was pretty interesting. So the idea behind it was, instead of you go out and looking for things, this Orca and in the background this other technology called Office Graphs will go out and comb your environment, so SharePoint, file shares, and email and that kind of stuff, and surface things to you that it thinks you're going to want. So imagine it kind of struck me as sort of like Facebook-y, sort of, where, if you don't have the whole sort by date, it tries to sort things by the order you think is going to be interesting to you. But one of the examples they showed was somebody was looking for a video that they'd watched with a coworker. That person wanted to look at that video. They were looking for a link. They fired up Orca, and Orca had that video in there, and it said who had presented it to them and all that kind of stuff. It looks interesting. I'm curious how well the application will be for it, if it's something that we're all just going to have up. It's obviously search in the background, and it's kind of a push search sort of thing. Looked kind of interesting. I'm sure. Thank goodness for Twitter. It's not called Orca. It's called Oslo. My mistake. Oslo. We'll fix that in post as well. But that'll look interesting. So you can see there's a bunch of these things. There's always new innovation going on. So those were a couple things that went on. One of the things that I kind of want to spend a couple minutes talking about was the silly popularity contest thing that goes on every year at the SharePoint conference, and there's a ton of things that match that description. But one of the things that the vendor Harmony does, and I can only assume it so that guys like me talk about it like I'm talking about it right now, they figure out the top 25 influencers in SharePoint. And they've done it for a couple of years now. I've been lucky enough to be on the list for a couple of years. They did it again this year, and I was, by their voting method, or however I don't know that Ernst & Young audited this kind of thing, but by their calculation, I was the number 3 influencer in the SharePoint community. Andrew Connell was number 1, Joel Olson number 2, and I was number 3. My coworker Laura Rogers was number 5. Randy Driscoll, another coworker of mine, was like 15. All the people you're used to seeing were on there, and it was pretty cool. So I will say I'm sort of 2 minds on this. Number 1, it very much seems like a company taking advantage of people who have a lot of exposure and trying to get those people to expose this company, because they sent out a tweet like a month ago and said, hey, you're one of the top 50. It's all voting from here on out. Send this link out to all your folks and have them vote for you. Well, obviously that link's going to go to their site, and people are going to be exposed to their products. Now, I don't know, unless you did something like SurveyMonkey or something, I don't know how else you would do that, but it does seem sort of a blatant attempt at eyeballs at marketing. So on one hand, I don't want to encourage that too much, but on the other hand, I also don't want to feel to look ingrateful for the people who did vote for me, because obviously a bunch of you did, and I'm not convinced that I deserve that kind of admiration, but I appreciate it very much, those of you that did go out and do it, because clearly a bunch of you did. So I got that. I got a couple of things, but I also got this incredibly heavy award here that's got my name on it that you can't see very well, but it's got down there, 2014 Top SharePoint Influencers. So thank you to Harmony for that. Thank you to all of you guys that voted out there for that. I didn't make a big stink about that. I didn't say much about it because it feels kind of funny. But I do appreciate everybody who thinks of that list and thinks of me and thinks I should be on it. So I very much appreciate that. Again, it's kind of silly, and I like to think that I'm a little bit above it, but in reality, it was pretty cool, and I was glad that I was on it. I forgot what night it was. I forgot when the whole thing was, so I was wearing my Trans Am t-shirt, so all the pictures of me accepting my award and all that, shaking the CEO's hand, are all wearing my Firebird t-shirt. It was kind of silly. But again, thanks to everybody. Again, I would like to think that I'm too cool for that kind of stuff, but it was pretty cool. I appreciate that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was Wednesday morning. We had a little get-together, had a little hooligan breakfast there at the conference, and good 20 people or so I just looked over my chat window there, and Lori's screaming, Oslo. Sorry about that. And the thing about that is that should have been obvious, because I assume that this is named Oslo because it was developed in Oslo, which is where the Fast company came from. So, Microsoft bought Fast before SharePoint 2010 came out, and that was rolled into search, and this is all. So I'm very clearly should have been easy to remember, but it wasn't. But anyway, had the hooligan breakfast there Wednesday morning. Had a great time. A bunch of familiar faces were there. So Doug and Lori and Shane and Jack and I think Naomi was there, and a bunch of people. Jared was there. A bunch of people that I knew were there. But there were also a bunch of people that I didn't know, which was pretty cool too. So I would guess a third maybe were fresh faces that I'd never met before. So super cool, and I'm so glad you guys came up. We had a great time. We were at two tables down there, so I tried to talk to people at both tables. So I apologize if anybody felt left out. I definitely did not want to make anybody feel left out. But that was great. I really appreciated that. I wish we could have done something bigger. I tried to do some stuff bigger. I tried to get the SPC TV thing going. For whatever reason, that just didn't work out. So I haven't talked to those guys to see what went wrong there. But tried to do something. The breakfast seemed the best. All of our nights were packed with things that were way cooler than to hang out with me. So the breakfast thing seemed pretty easy. And I appreciate everybody that showed up for that. That made me feel good. The other thing that was great was that I bet another 20, 25 people that I'd never met before came up during the conference and said, hey, I listened to the Netcast and you don't suck. So that was pretty cool. I know that it can be uncomfortable to go up to a complete stranger and say, hey, you don't know me, but I watch your show. So I appreciate everybody who did that. Again, I can see how that would be a little intimidating. But thanks to everybody that did that. I met a bunch of people whose names I'd seen in Twitter and talked to, people I'd seen in the chat room a couple of times. I really appreciate you guys coming up. That means a lot to me, especially on nights like tonight. And I don't know how much of this will get edited out, but had a bunch of technical difficulties. The chat room's down. My machine's freezing up. I'm sure my cat's going to chew through one of my cables here in a minute. Knowing that there are people out there that are getting value from this, and knowing that there are people out there who would miss it if it was gone, helps me drive through some of these frustrating moments. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming up to me and letting me know that you watch it. A couple of you guys were pretty helpful with hints for things that I could do better. And it's something that I'd never heard before last week, though it was something that I kind of thought that I needed to do anyway. But three of you mentioned the audio volume. Specifically, that the music at the beginning, the bumper music, is too loud, and I kind of knew that already. And then that the audio levels are not consistent throughout the Netcast, and I kind of knew that already too, but I didn't know how much I wanted to fuss with that. So one of the folks that I talked to, a guy named Mario, mentioned that he had done some audio stuff, kind of an audio engineer sort of guy, volunteered his time to make my audio suck a little less. So I'm going to take him up on that. He's given me some tips. If I can make it work, hopefully here on Netcast 191 we'll do that. We'll compress it a little bit so that the differences in volume are a little smaller, so there's not so much contrast in loud and soft, kind of even it all out. But it was funny. He mentioned that to me Tuesday night, I think, at the Red Party, and then Wednesday at the breakfast, 2 different people mentioned it to me. So I hadn't heard any feedback from anybody about it until that 2-day span. That's probably a 12-hour span, knowing how late that Red Party went. And then I had 3 people mention it. So you jerks need to let me know when there's stuff like this I need to fix. Don't wait till you meet me in person. Send me a tweet at Todd Klindt. Send me an email, todd.klindt@rackspace.com. Let me know these things because you guys are being all shy and quiet. And I've been cranking these things out with crappy audio for however long. So it's all your fault. But hopefully Mario and I can get that figured out. He sent me some tips yesterday or today, I forget. So when I render this out tomorrow, I'll try to incorporate those tips and make that audio sound a little better. But I definitely appreciate the tips. Was hoping to do something big around the renaming, and that didn't quite happen because I didn't know how all that was going to work. So we'll probably do that now. We're coming up on the 200th episode, so maybe I'll do it there. We'll see. 200th episode may end up being somewhere around SP TechCon or TechEd. So I need to count that out, figure out when 200 is going to be, and maybe plan something special around that. But again, thanks for everybody that came to the Rackspace booth. If you did go to any of our sessions, all of our slides and scripts and everything everybody from Rackspace did is at Rackspace. Now is at sharepoint.rackspace.com/SPC, and hopefully this is my mental cue here to put this in the lower third. All the stuff that we did, people have been asking about slides and all that. It's all there already. But again, SharePoint Conference was a huge success. Had a blast. Can't wait to the next one. Thanks to everybody who came up and said hey, and all the people I hung out with. You guys made it tough to leave. But thanks for that. So the other big news that I wanted to talk about tonight, and I've got some other little newses down here, was that SharePoint 2013 Service Pack 1 came out a couple weeks ago this Thursday, so right before the SharePoint conference. So Service Pack 1 puts our build number at 15.0.4569, and then depending on how you get the last number, it's either 1000 or 1506 or something like that. So talk a quick bit about which patches you should install. As this is a service pack, my guidance on this is to install it as quickly as is reasonable. So hopefully you've already got it in your test environment. You've already installed it a couple of times. You've already poked the new pieces that come in it. But get it out there, test it for a month or so, make sure that everything's good to go. Keep an eye on my builds page to see what kind of problems people report to me, and then within the next 2 or 3 months have a plan to get that out into production and get that installed. There's a whole bunch of things that this thing adds, but I'm going to hit some of the highlights, at least some of the things that I see. It includes the patches, fixes up through the December 2013 cumulative update. It's got a couple of critical on-demand patches past that, but CU-wise, it lines up with the December CU. It adds improved support for Internet Explorer 11. Lord knows there's only one way to go with support for Internet Explorer 11, and that's up, so we got that in there. It adds support for Windows Server 2012 R2, but only if you download the ISO. Slipstreaming Service Pack 1 into an RTM build does not add that. There are some weird things. You're going to have problems with the prereq installer. You're going to get the wrong versions of a couple of things. So if you download the ISO version of Service Pack 1, then that will have Windows 2012 R2 support. Right now, the only place I've seen that is MSDN, but I'm sure at some point that'll show up on the regular web. You can install this on RTM, so this is a place where they've changed their tune a couple of times. When the March 2013 public update came out, they said every future patch will require this. And when it comes to cumulative updates, that's absolutely been the case. I've tried to install every post-March 2013 cumulative update on RTM, and every one of them's failed. So they stuck to it with that. When Service Pack 1 came out, they said you should install it on March 2013 public update. But then just today, as I was getting my notes together for this, when I found the knowledge base article, it does now say in the knowledge base article that you can install Service Pack 1 on RTM. And I have done that. I did it the day that it came out. Everything worked fine. It didn't explode. But you should have March 2013 PU, but if not, it looks like you can skip it. I'm not recommending that. If you do that and it all explodes, don't say, Todd Klindt said it was okay. I said no such thing. I said you should be ashamed of yourself for not having the March 2013 public update on already. Go sit in a corner for 5 minutes. Think about what you've done. But it looks like it can be installed right on RTM. I have not tried to slipstream it yet. We'll see if that works. I'll let you know. Another thing that it does, it adds support for pulling the social piece out of the user profile service and putting that up in Yammer. When you create your user profile service, there's a spot to do that. And another piece of that is they support moving your My Sites off of your on-premises installation and moving those up into Office 365. Now, I haven't done either of those yet. I need to get Yammer and Office 365 accounts set up that that I can do that with and point that to. But it looks like they're kind of making this hybrid model a little easier to do. Another thing they did, which is very important, is they went did a find with replace everywhere. It said SkyDrive, now it says OneDrive. That was a very important change, but that's all there now. So, excuse me, a couple of folks have pinged me with potential Service Pack 1 issues. As soon as I can get those reproduced or see knowledge base articles about it or something, I will add them. As always, you can get all the information that I know about this patch and any other by going to www.toddklindt.com/SP2013builds, and that's got the wiki page and all that. And you can follow me on Twitter, SP2013 patches, and as new patches come out or as I find out problems with patches, I will tweet them out. That is the only thing those accounts will tweet, so if you don't want to follow me, and I don't blame you one bit for that, you can follow the SP2013 patches account. It will only be about SharePoint patches. And then there's an SP2010 patches account as well for that. A tangential thing, and I would paste this in the chat room, but I can't because there's no chat room tonight. Because of some stuff I was working out with work and things like that, I have added the workflow manager builds to the SharePoint 2013 builds list. So it has, that page, toddklindt.com/SP2013builds, has the SharePoint build numbers, when they came out, links and all that kind of stuff. And then a couple of months ago, I added the Office web apps. So those are out there now. You can add those. And then just most recently added the workflow manager to that list as well. That one's pretty easy to keep track of. There have only been 2 cumulative updates for the workflow manager, so not too tough to keep track of, but that's there. I haven't worked the workflow manager or the Office web apps into the wiki, the bugs and notes piece yet. Haven't decided how I'm going to do that. And I'm open to suggestions about that, but hopefully that will help people out keep track of that. I will also say that if you're running all this stuff, probably my preferred build levels at this point are going to be Service Pack 1 for SharePoint 2013, March 2013 public update before that. For Office web apps, probably the March 2013 public update. And for the Workflow Manager, cumulative update 1. And remember, two little bits about that one. If you upgrade the Workflow Manager, you have to upgrade Service Bus separately. So you have to upgrade Service Bus and then upgrade Workflow Manager on top of it. And also, if you have a bunch of servers, any SharePoint servers that are not running the Workflow Manager, they have the Workflow client on them. You have to upgrade that client as well. So a couple of things there. That's all on that wiki page or on that builds page, but I know what it's like. That page comes up and it's words, 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 words. Oh, hey, here's a link, and you click it and you don't read the words on the page. I'm the same way. I'm not judging. But that's out there too. So again, hopefully that helps some folks keep their stuff up to date. If you have any suggestions on how I can format that or whatever, don't be shy. Don't wait until the next SharePoint conference to tell me, for goodness sakes. Let me know. And by my calculations, I'm sitting at about 35 minutes, so I will cover just a couple more things, and then we'll go. So I got an email from Bart last week. He found a bug that he wanted added to my wiki page, and that was a bug where you cannot add items to a SharePoint 2010 list that was created with SharePoint Designer after you install the August 2013 cumulative update. So Bart emailed that to me, and he emailed me the knowledge base article that says that was fixed in the February 2013 update. So that was good. That was the problem and the solution. So I updated both the August 2013 and February 2014 pages to reflect that. So thanks to Bart for that. Hopefully he saves some folks some pain down the road. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is, you all know I've got this little Dell Venue Pro, cutest little tablet in the house right now, and it runs a full version of Windows 8. I've got a couple of blog posts I'm thinking about posting about this. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I've got a bunch of friends now that have these, and hopefully there's nothing embarrassing on my start screen. So I know that Lori's got one. I think Enrique, he was in the chat room, he's got one. Jeff DeVerter's got one. Just a bunch of people have these things. Just fantastic little things to play with. A couple $100, runs full version of Windows. Used it a lot when I traveled to the SharePoint Conference. Kind of solidified my love for it. One of my frustrations with the Dell Venue 8 Pro is that there's a single USB port on here. And that is, it's a special kind of USB port called USB on the go, or USB OTG to its homies. And that USB OTG port is both charging and for peripherals. So the way it works is if you plug a charger into it, the tablet charges. If you plug, well, I guess you need a special cable. Oh, geez. So you need a little number like this. It's got a USB OTG port on one end and a female USB port on the other end. So you drop this in here, hook up a thumb drive, do whatever, mouse, and you can hook peripherals up. What you couldn't ever do was hook them both up. And that was kind of frustrating because I know a lot of folk kind of had this idea about using the Dell Venue 8 Pro as kind of a desktop replacement. Now it's only got 2 gig of RAM. It's got kind of a small screen, stuff like that. But there's this idea that when you're traveling, that might be enough. It's good enough for live, for email. It's good enough for web browsing, things like that. But this whole idea that you can't charge it while you're using it is kind of a pain in the tush. So this USB on the go thing is a standard. I've had other tablets that had it. But there's a software and a hardware component to it. And for whatever reason, Dell crippled the ability to charge and connect peripherals at the same time. But fortunately, some folks on the internet that are way smarter than me found a solution to this, and I blogged it this week. So it's right now, it's the last. Oh, heck, now I can paste it to the chat room because the chat room's back up. So basically what we need to do to make this all work is we need to get this special cable here. This plugs into the Dell Venue 8 here. It's got the USB thing on it. And it's got one connector here on the end, but the thing that makes it magical, and I do mean just flat out magical, is in the middle it's got this switch that says charge or data. So this is for devices that don't know how to handle, if something's connected to charge or data, something like this. So this thing lets you tell the device. Now the thing about this and what makes it applicable to the Dell is the Venue 8 Pro only checks if the charger is connected immediately. There's a signal on the wire, and then it starts charging, but it quits checking for that signal. So if you take this cable and then you connect it to this cable, which has a female end for the charger and a male end for peripherals, you can plug it in. With this set to charge, the Venue 8 will start charging, and then you switch it over to data, and then you can use your peripherals, and it works like a champ. Now, I alternately got this little thing here that's got a female micro and then a female regular size one, so that I could hook a hub or any kind of regular USB devices up to it. But it works like a champ. So set it on charge, plug your charger in, plug it into the Dell Venue 8. Dell Venue 8 starts to charge, flip it over to data, all your USB devices pop in, and you're good to go. And it just works that way forever. So this whole mess of cables, and it is just a mess, was like $9 on Deal Extreme. I got a link to all the cables on my blog. I will warn you, it took me like 3 weeks to get all these cables because they literally come from a slow boat from China. But it was like $9, and then you can use this, your Dell Venue Pro, for everything. So that puts me, I think, at about 40 minutes. Oh, fine. Oh, this will just take a minute. The other thing is, for those of us that have Surfaces, I still have my Surface Pro 2. It's my daily driver. Love it to pieces and all that. One of the cool things that they announced when they announced the Surface Pro 2 and the Surface 2 was that there would be a keyboard, a battery keyboard, charging keyboard for it, but it's not out yet. So they released that. They released the release date and the price for that. The price for that is going to be Drum roll, please. Oh, I forgot in my notes. I think it's $170, something like that. $200, and it will start shipping next week. So for $200, you'll get a keyboard, and it's a type keyboard, so it's the good kind of keyboard. And it will increase your battery, they say, by 70%, which is pretty significant because the Pro 2's got some pretty good battery life. If you use the tips that I talked about a month or so ago about how to prolong your tablet's battery life, it'll go a super long time. But you can get that if you're going to use your tablet a lot on the go. So $200, the charging keyboard. The only downside to this one is that it's not backlit. So I'm a big fan of backlit keyboards, and the new type keyboard, the new touch keyboard are also backlit, but this one forever is not. For whatever reason. So check that out if you get one of these tablets. I'm honestly probably not going to order one, but if you do end up getting one of these keyboards for your tablet, let me know what you think. Send me a tweet or whatever. And this is a good thing. I definitely like this. So I got to almost everything. There's just a couple of other things I didn't get to, but we will get to them next week. There will be a Netcast next week, so I will take care of that. Apologize to those of you who are watching live. The chat room, I had no control over that. There are some conspiracy theorists in the chat room that would like to point out that as soon as I started telling the most embarrassing story about myself from SharePoint Conference, that's when the chat room went away. I will tell you that this chat room is run by Ars Technica. I know a couple of the guys there. Ars Technica is a pretty big tech website. I do not wield the kind of power it would take to take their IRC server down. So I wish that was the case. I wish I could do that, but that's not the case. But I apologize for that and all that. Thanks to everybody. The chat room came back strong, about 20 people. There've been 20 people sitting there hitting refresh trying to get this back up and going. Also, for those of you that are on the video feed, first, my apologies. Goodness, I hope you're covering up half the screen. But thanks to Jack Frew in the chat room, I got some lights behind me here, and I'm going to kind of play with that a little bit and kind of make the visuals a little better. We're going to work on the audio. I'm going to work on the video. Thanks to Jack for that. Jack and I have been talking about this light thing for 6 months probably, and I've just never pulled the trigger and bought the lights and played with it. So what Jack did was Jack bought the lights and Jack sent them home with me from the SharePoint conference against my will, because I didn't want to be responsible for Jack's lights, and it looks like it's a keeper. It looks like it's going to be pretty good. So thanks to Jack. Eric Carlo in the chat room is saying probably the best thing that we can do to get better visuals is to get a more handsome host. I can't argue. The bad news, Eric, is you're not him. So I don't know. We would have to get somebody who'd want to come to the studios here in Ames, and I don't know. But and Eric's feeling very pent up because he's had 40 minutes of insults and no chat room in which to insult me. I know that's the bulk of the reason that a lot of the people in the chat room show up is to give me grief, and then the chat room fell out from under him today. And somebody else was looking in the chat room. They had to reboot the server, fix some disk issues. So. But thanks to everybody. Thanks to the chat room. I'm going to be around for a bit so you can insult me to my face. Thanks to the listening audience. Hopefully the audio is better this week. Thanks to Mario for that suggestion. To the video audience, the background hopefully is going to look a little better. And thanks to Jack for making that all happen. Once again, I'm Todd Klindt. You can reach me at Todd Klindt on Twitter, todd.klindt@rackspace.com. Would love to hear your feedback, suggestions for the show, questions, any of that kind of stuff. I would love to hear it all, so get a hold of me. So that is it. We'll call this a wrap. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.